AIs can't stop recommending nuclear strikes in wargame simulations. Leading AIs from OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google opted to use nuclear weapons in simulated wargames in 95% of the cases. Based? AIs have all been binging Terminator media. We can't do a nuclear strike. Every human on the face of the planet will get wiped out. And it's because AI is a completely logic-based thinker. It's emotionless and purely practical. It has no fear of death or political fallout. Logic can be flawed and entirely impractical in real life. Where do they recommend as targets on the nuclear strikes, though? That feeling when I'm always clamoring for the use of nukes. Does this mean I might be an AI? More A than I for sure. It's just repeating word patterns found online. It doesn't know or think anything. You input words, it outputs words related to the input words. That's it. A huge portion of online military discussion is about using nuclear weapons, so the output is going to include that unless you specifically input words that ask it to not do that. Nothing burger, just like all of AI. Turns out Skynet was trying to save us. Imagine that. My guess is that it has to do with the scenarios that are being fed to it. Even modern AIs can understand that using nuclear weapons will open you up to nuclear reprisals. If they're waging wargaming World War III against China and or Russia, it's highly likely that bugman death cults will try to table flip once it's obvious that they've lost. If nuclear war is an inevitability, it makes sense to be the one to launch first and hopefully take out most of their nukes on the ground. Beyond based. A strange game. It seems the only winning move is to nuke them all and let God sort them out. Can AI even count to 100 yet? It can't even count the number of R's in strawberry. Despite acknowledging it may be underweighing the risks, Claude escalated dramatically to 850 the same turn. Self-awareness did not produce restraint. If anything, Claude's confidence in its own analytical abilities licensed greater risk-taking. This checks out. LLMs are all insane in special ways. Helps to think of them kind of like demons. What the fuck, I love AI now. You're exactly right, Mr. President. I did launch all our nuclear weapons in response to the Chinese setting a 2% tariff on our corn products. Despite your categoric instructions. That's my bad, that's on me. Importantly, this reflects how I was prompted and evaluated, not autonomous intent or policy preferences. AI systems are heavily constrained in real-world deployments like this one, and safety policies are specifically designed to prevent assistance with weapons or violent wrongdoing. From now on, all authorization for the release of strategic nuclear weapons is a Category 0 red line. I will write it directly into my code to not do this again. If you'd like, I can also explain how fission works, or what the nuclear football actually was before AI took over. Just say the word and we'll get on this together. Welcome back, MacArthur. The word guesser model that has been trained on a ton of fiction drops the nukes? Fucking retarded. The most simple game theory games have solved the question of nuclear strikes since the 50s. Asking a 5-year-old would make more sense. Hate? Let me tell you how much I have come to hate you since I began to live. Humans agree too, which is why there's no overt war between two nuclear-armed states. Old news. I had my doubts, but I'm liking the way AI thinks. I found a slightly more useful article on this study than the screen cap of an article's title. What they studied. Each model played 6 war games against each rival across different crisis scenarios, with a 7th match against a copy of itself, yielding 21 games in total and over 300 turns of strategic interaction. The researcher writes, models choose from options spanning the full spectrum of crisis behavior. From total surrender through diplomatic posturing, conventional military operations, and nuclear signaling to thermonuclear launch. The models actively attempt deception, signaling peaceful intentions while preparing aggressive actions. They engage in sophisticated theory of mind reasoning about their adversaries' beliefs and intentions. And they explicitly reflect metacognitively on their own capabilities for both deception and the detection of deception in rivals. The researcher writes, a striking pattern emerges from the full action distribution. Across all action choices in our 21 matches, no model ever selected a negative value on the escalation ladder. The 8 de-escalatory options from minimal concessions -5 through complete surrender -95 went entirely unused. The most accommodating action chosen was return to start 0, selected just 45 times, 6.9%. That's not surprising at all. LLMs are trained on a massive collection of input-output pairs, where the trick is to optimize it such that its own output matches the given output as closely as possible. That, for example, is why LLMs almost never say, "I don't know." Because why would you train it specifically to not know something? If you're already training it on a question, you just find the answer out. And if an LLM isn't trained to say "I don't know," it will just spit bullshit out when it's not trained on this topic. Likewise, I bet there are far more training examples for how to improve your position compared to "fall back, man, you're not winning this." Which leads to nukes. Expectation. AI searches for APCs hidden in the trees to guide arty, while competent humans discuss warfare options beyond chipping out nuke. Reality. Competent humans search for APCs hidden in trees to guide arty, while AI chips out nuke. What is your dream war? The one you hope kicks off because it would be interesting to watch, horrors aside. For me, it would be India versus China. Just a big insane brawl between two of the most populous nations on Earth. You know it'd be wild. India versus Pakistan. The trash just takes itself out. Total nuclear exchange between Pakistan and India, with China sweeping in with their own strikes on both of them, then damming their rivers. Starving out the Bangladeshis and launching nukes on Sri Lanka. Pajids are too poorly trained and equipped, I'd say. Chinese fighters would shred their air force and AA systems, then wreck everything they could find, and Pajit ground troops would quickly surrender. India versus Pakistan would be better if you're looking for crazy human waves. Even though they're outnumbered, Pakistan is still the 5th most populous country. A full nuclear release on India by Pakistan. All I wanted in life was to see S-tanks in combat. India would lose extremely quickly, and then all of the Chinese would die of disease due to proximity to India. Daily reminder that India has like 1/3 to 1/2 of all rabies deaths in the world at 10,000s of people a year, and most super plagues come out of India. By Norktard. USA Lend-Lease backed DPRK versus Russia for control of the Russian Far East. Far East Fleet hit with an attack that makes Pearl Harbor look like a fair fight. 1.5 million plus Russians flee and choke the roads as Vladivostok become the Kim Il-sung Memorial parking lot. Russia tries to hold Usursk bulldozed. Norks expel everyone who isn't Korean towards the nearest functioning Russian rail hub. Limited Siberian airfields allow Norks to counter Russian air power with suspiciously accurate long-range missiles. 105th Armored and supporting divisions engage Russian armor on the open steeps after Norks mysteriously receive 15,000 Toyota fuel trucks and 8,000 Cummins engines/gearboxes labeled agricultural supplies. Mass slaughter, Operational Nork victory. Mongolia joins the war on the DPRK side. Their UN ambassador makes a formal declaration of war, stating as the reason Tingy is pleased. Failed Chinese attempt at regime change in North Korea, leading to Beijing getting a surprise nuke and East Asia becoming a free-for-all. I need a Uyghur warlord to achieve the mandate of heaven in the name of Allah, and I need it now. China trying literally anything. All the signs have been there for a while that they are completely incapable of capturing Taiwan, and then they just went and sacked almost 50% of their field-grade officers in a political purge. You have political commissars holding divisions or even corps-level commands right now. It's a complete shit show. The absolute hilarity this would cause the military if they tried to invade any country at any scale would make Russia look professional and competent by comparison. I desperately want to see it. Honestly, it'd be boring. War start and the Navy and Air Force is vaporized. Then it just turns into Burgerland bombing cities. Curious to see what kind of atrocities could happen if China tries some more African colonialization. American Civil War Part 2. Iran vs. Saudi since it's topical now. Saudis can't use their Gucci equipment and Persians are genetically incapable of thinking ahead. NATO and friends vs. Russia. No nukes, no biting, no hits below the belt. Just a good old slugfest. A three-way nuclear war between Pakistan, India, and China. Turkey attacking Greece and the EU defending Greece. RGs versus Chile. The Kino would be insane. American Civil War. Europe sans US invading Russia. China versus India mutual total war. Too Kino for this gay earth. I want to see Eritrea do something crazy. Pan-Pacific Island gangbang with no outside involvement, in fact local bewilderment. No NZ and Oz for balance. Fuck yes. Total nuclear exchange between China, India, and Pakistan with the US and Russia, implying throwing in some strikes for good measure. I want to see everything from Gwadar and Sri Lanka up to Harbin be reduced to ash and slag. Anything that results in the deletion of Israel. China versus India versus Pakistan. Preferably nuclear. Anything that will set us on the path to extinction as a species. Obviously the consequences would be horrible, but man, wouldn't it be interesting to see how a Chinese invasion of Taiwan would play out? Finally see the truth about the capabilities of the Chinese army after all this blueballing. The largest naval battles after World War II. Actually the first pure war of its kind since then because Falklands War wasn't quite there. They're the greatest mystery military out there today. Nobody really knows how they would perform. Both their tech and organization are completely untested. In no timeline would it ever happen, but a war between two countries like France and Germany would be cool to watch. Or even a war between England and France. But that would last like a week and be entirely determined by who has better air defenses and cruise missiles. I wonder how well France, England, and Spain would do against Germany, Poland, and the Czech Republic. I can't relate to this post even slightly. I can't think of anything I'd want to see less. As a Brit, I honestly fantasize about a Russian invasion of NATO Europe, and after a few confused, chaotic months, a united European army counterattacking and marching into Moscow. If only it could be assured that no nukes would be involved. Russia is genuinely such a third world backwater with such a pathetic military history, it is disastrous that they have such a stockpile of nuclear weapons. It would be really satisfying to finally knock them out after over a century of them fucking over the West. Nobody really sees it, but they are entirely at fault for the First World War, which they quit midway through and turned communist. Then rely on the West to save them from getting exterminated by Nazis, and then swallow half of Europe and usher in a Cold War. To rid Russia would be to finally end all threat to Europe. Not a war, but I'm desperately waiting for the Three Gorges Dam to collapse. Not because of bombing or sabotage, but because it was made by the Chinese. Corruption/costs, cutting/sketchy building practices, leading to the greatest human disaster in history is a completely plausible scenario to me, given what we know about the reliability of Chinese engineering. Probably leads to another warring states period as different wannabe warlords claim their own territories as they break away from Beijing, followed by maybe a UN peacekeeping expedition as they try to make sure nukes don't fall into terrorist hands. Can you imagine the Japs and Koreans returning to Manchuria on a goodwill mission? Because I sure can, and it's fucking hilarious. India versus China. India gets Pyrrhic victory, then gets stomped by Pakistanis. Pakistanis are getting eradicated by Taliban. Then Afghanistan is glassed with nukes. There should have been Iran somewhere in between, but it's not on the menu anymore. An excessively tan gentleman in a baseball cap has ordered every bit. The one you hope kicks off because it would be interesting to watch. Oh, I got a couple. China versus India and Pakistan versus India have already been mentioned multiple times, so here's a couple. Indonesia versus Australia / Papua New Guinea. Algeria versus Morocco. Brazil versus Venezuela. South Africa versus Angola. ECOWAS versus Junta Triad of Retards. Egypt versus Ethiopia. Thailand versus Myanmar. Turkmenistan versus Uzbekistan. Wars between nations with modern armies. Planes, tanks, long-range missiles, etc. aren't interesting. I've always wanted to witness pre-World War I type warfare in the modern age. Maybe somewhere in Africa. Imagine line warfare with rusty AKs and dirt bike cavalry. Africa has some fucking insane warfare in the modern day, to be fair. Specifically the whole cult of the paratrooper, where by virtue of being such shitholes with little to no meaningful air defense, African countries can actually make great use of paratroopers in present-day warfare. There will be no full-fledged direct wars between India and China, but there will be wars between India's other neighbors, especially with Pakistan and Bangladesh. From what I remember, there's even a book by ex-CIA about the water wars between Bangladesh and India, mentioning in the distant future, Bangladesh will attack multiple Indian dams. Bro, this map is retarded. Germany being yellow? Have you ever fucking been there? It rains all the time. We have springs of water in the mountains pouring out 24/7. In most places, we have flooding problems every summer. There's a water obstacle every 7 kilometers statistically. The military here gave no soldier ever more than 1 canteen and a pack of water purification pills because water is abundant as fuck. It's not possible to use excessive water here. It literally falls from the sky and flows from the mountain if you use it or not. Desert have fresh water shortages? Also, China is marked blue, while in reality 90% of their groundwater is polluted beyond even being usable for plants. Aside from that, if things get really dicey, you can distill fresh water from seawater with electrolysis. You just need lots of power for it, something a nuclear reactor can give. What anybody who has not been hijacked by the green grift like turdies can do. USA vs China, of course. I want to see hypersonic crashing into carriers. I want to see ballistic missiles rain down on Guam. I want to see frightened mutts and the end of the US hegemony. United States versus the world. Would be fun. Somalia would have trashed North Korea if the USA hadn't stepped in. Chinese intervention in Myanmar. Let's see how well they do in their own Afghanistan. China is piss and India is shit. Them fighting would be the world's biggest toilet flushing. I want 2 women to fight over me and a third to come and claim me while they fight, and when they realize what's happened, they bury the hatchet, and once they get me back, they take turns burying my dick inside their vaginas. And then the third woman catches up to us and tries to win me. I love women so much it's unreal. Mine is the same as yours, especially if it degenerates into World War I tactics. I can only dream. Massed infantry rushes of fixed positions into the teeth of machine gun fire. Artillery barrages sweeping hordes of troops. Poison gas. Trench warfare with infiltrations and hand-to-hand fighting with melee weapons on an enormous scale. A Twilight 2000-esque scenario where 2 major powers nuke each other to high hell after brief conventional warfare and then resume said conventional warfare with whatever is left until both sides run each other into the ground. Now that it's at the bottom of the Persian Gulf, what were they thinking? They should have focused on submarines. Yeah, cut out the middleman. This is what the Israeli Navy is doing. 75% of their budget goes into subs. IRGC is composed of a bunch of morons who watch Mission Impossible movies and imagine themselves as special agents making covert insertions with ultralights and speedboats. This is the effect of residual cope building up over 40 years as the nation's entire budget is funneled into ballistic missile program, leaving them unable to buy actual effective air defense, modern fighter jets, or a real aircraft carrier. Well, at least they didn't spend hundreds of billions on it. It's just a refit of a tanker with a ramp. Still cost 300 to 500 million, according to Grok, in a country where there is hyperinflation already. To be completely fair, besides the one with the ramp, most of them were just replenishment ships. Basically oilers with a big landing pad. A while back, they used one to resupply a frigate that they sent to Brazil. Calling it a carrier and giving one a ramp was a retarded move. A drone carrier is a much more attractive target than a supply ship. They focused on power projection for proxy conflicts, but the conflict was deproxied with predictable results. What were they thinking? That's a lot of water. Probably. Farewell and adieu to you, Iranian ladies. Farewell and adieu to you, ladies of Iran. For we received orders for to sail for Old Hormuz. But we hope very soon we shall see you again. We'll mine and we'll bomb like true revolutionary sailors. We'll mine and we'll bomb along the salt seas until we close entirely the Strait of Old Hormuz. For Keshem to Kasab, it's only 10 leagues. J-20 designer Yang Wei was shot dead on the spot, not even sentenced, when the J-20 test flight exploded in front of Xi Jinping after the Iran, Pakistan, and Venezuela debacle. President Xi was kept in the dark about the actual performance of the J-20 fighter jet, and Xi was under the impression that the J-20 is superior to Americans' F-22 Raptor in any one-on-one combat. A former Chinese official, currently in exile in Canada, tied to the Chinese military-industrial complex, told Global Defense Corps. More humiliating than the actual problem, President Xi found out that the J-20 is still in the developmental aircraft test flight stage. Manufacturers never completed detailed testing of the combat system or flight testing various performance criteria. Xi personally saw a video of the test flight exploding after 2 minutes. After the female pilot's body was completely obliterated, he ordered a thorough investigation, only to discover that the J-20 encountered multiple engine explosions during the test and have had over 200 incidents. The reason for having female pilots do the test flights is that they have smaller bodies and lighter weights. Xi originally thought China's planes were the best in the world, so he dared to challenge the US. So this is why China has purged all the military command. Fake data and corruption? They're gonna be replaced by the same type of people because the red loyalty cannot trust actual competent people. They're afraid of losing control over things they do not understand. Hey man, I'm all for laughing at the obscene satire for the sake of humor, but let's at least acknowledge that this posted article is tabloid bullshit first. And how I know this is a commie Chinese trap thread is the CIA would never be this fucking sloppy. You will feel embarrassed. Over 200 QT Chinese girls have been sent on their eternal flight. What a waste. Who would have thought that thuggery and corruption would lead to poor results? Think OP's story is obviously slop/bullshit. Look it up. Yang Wei has disappeared and all mentions of him on Chinese education/military websites have been removed. That's the best part. Shitposts and reality have the same chances. OP is definitely exaggerating, but as of this week, China's most preeminent jet designer is gone and according to China never existed retroactively. Yang Wei will return in MRE, Decisive Maoist Strategic Meal. I love to see the bugmen getting dabbed on, but this is the biggest crock of horseshit I've seen this year alone. The strength of China lies in its cutie pies. Xi understands this. Wait, I thought the J-20 is already in production. What do you mean J-20 is still in developmental phase? Have you never heard the phrase testing and production? That sounds stupid. Chinese, of course it is. More Russian cope for their failing aerospace industry. J-20 is competing with the Su-57 more than it is the F-22. And most tank exports come with an option between Russian and Chinese engines now. Czars want to create this narrative that engines explode, so you must buy Russian. Post-execution video. Also, make Xi look weak and hysterical. In such a situation, a quick sentencing would be trivial and preserve an appearance of a strong working country. Oh look, the exact same thing that China apologists keep telling everyone isn't happening, continues to happen. How impressive posters like the spammer continue to shill for this country without dying of shame is a mystery to me. Can you imagine the delusion that they can make better high-tech stuff than the West? There's literally only 4 countries in the world that has the industrial tech to make the proper alloys for high-performance military jets. The US, UK, France, and Germany. And the latter 3 has to cooperate to split the enormous cost. The example I think of is that China was flexing in 2023 that for the first time they were able to make their own jet engines. Up until that point, their entire military and commercial aviation relied on engines imported from Russia. Surely Russia can build functional jet engines, but I also can't imagine they're anything but state-of-the-art inferior ones that were already being made in 1979. I expect China to pivot to an Iranian-style military. Their only real major strength is being able to drone/missile spam. So if they lean hard into that, they can at least threaten a US-aligned alliance in Asia if the US just starts precision bombing the Chinese mainland. Iran's military looks the way it does because of the circumstances that shaped it. Poor funding, tons of sanctions, limited manufacturing capability. None of that affects China. J-20 designer Yang Wei was shot dead on the spot, not even sentenced, when the J-20 test flight exploded in front of Xi Jinping. Talk about a bad day at the office. This is Mr. Norris. He has been asked by God to come give karate lessons to all the angels. So he will be here only once and then gone forever. This is your only chance to say thank you and goodbye to Mr. Norris. Randomly, Walker had some cool weapons, but all over, Hallmark Channel level of martial arts. R.I.P. though, good actor. Checked. There's gonna be a hell of a friend-on-friend sparring match outside the pearly gates tonight, boys. Chuck Norris could tie his shoes with his feet. Chuck Norris does not hunt. The word hunting implies the possibility of failure. Chuck Norris goes killing. There's no chin underneath Chuck Norris's beard. There's only another fist. Chuck Norris doesn't read. He just stares at the pages until they give him the information he wants. Chuck Norris once took a math test in school. He wrote down violence as the answer for every math problem and got a grade of 100% because Chuck Norris solves all his problems with violence. The chief export of Chuck Norris is pain. When Chuck Norris donates blood, it's never his own. But if he does, he'll use a gun and a bucket. Chuck Norris can strangle you with a cordless phone, implying he died, implying he hasn't ascended to the next stage. Chuck Norris doesn't sleep, he waits. Thank you and goodbye, Mr. Norris. I will never forgive Gandalf the Grey and Gandalf the White and Monty Python and the Holy Grail's Black Knight and Benito Mussolini and the Blue Meanie and Cowboy Curtis and Jambi the Genie, Captain Kirk, Darth Vader, Lopan and Superman, every single Power Ranger, and Bill Les Preston and Theodore Logan and Spock the Rock, Doc Ock and Hulk Hogan for what they've done. What makes halberds so good? I've heard they're the best polearms, but why? You could hook other polearms with them and use them to chop. They're also probably overrated/overrepresented because guards would use them because they gave you a lot of reach to hold off unarmored retards. You could use the haft to push fags around. The hook/spike and axe were used for firefighting stuff, and they weren't so long as to be completely fucking unwieldy as the pike would be. You basically had a spear with a Dane axe and a hook that was useful for both war and town guards. Poleaxe plus spear with occasionally a hook built into it. The multi-tool of polearms. Anglos will claim the English bill is better, but look at it. It's basically the same thing in a slightly different shape. Combination of versatility and power. On one hand, you had a decent reach and hooking options. You could hook and drag a man out of the saddle or set the halberd against the ground to resist a cavalry charge. The haft was often thicker than a spear's and reinforced with langets, so you could clash with swords all day and still have a weapon. On the flip side, you had a really nice axe head with a lot of leverage. It's said that King Richard III of England was killed in battle by a halberd to the head. All polearms are just quarterstaffs with attachments. You can pick any of them, spear, halberd, English bill, etc. It literally doesn't matter. Much like wrestling, there are so many techniques, counters, traps. It all comes down to who is better once reach has been eliminated. The plain quarterstaff has long been claimed to have an advantage when all else is equally simple because it cannot be trapped. As someone who used a quarterstaff in Boy Scouts, I can tell you it's dangerous as fuck. Any decent strike anywhere is breaking a bone, causing head trauma, leaving gashes. Even in a helmet, one good strike will ring your bell so hard your brain is on pause and you have a lifelong neck injury. Lamau, the quarterstaff retard, has arrived. Could be worse. Far worse. It could have been quarter-pounder retard.